The way that I've decided to plan this is based on some of the feedback I have been getting. One or two groups have sent me some work. Now, I am not going to show their work off because I'm not sure kind of how you feel about that, but you might want to show your work off when you get the chance. However, one of the mails I received said that this exercise that we're doing is very difficult because it's so new to you. Now, I know that, and so does the censor in the exam. So in that sense, you don't need to worry. The samples of work I have seen, some of them are quite good, some of them are not perfect, some of them are okay, but none of them are bad. Okay, so we don't need to worry about the exam. However, there are one or two things I need to say about the exam. First of all, of course, the exam is online, but we don't need to worry too much about that because everything's online at the moment. However, each group gets 30 minutes. And it is an oral exam. So you have to talk. And the best thing you can do is to introduce your work. And when you introduce it, that is kind of your choice. You don't have to do it. But if you don't do it, you get questions straight away. If not, questions immediately. So my advice would be that it's a good idea to have a 2 or 3 minute presentation, maybe 1 minute per person, something like that, where you talk a little bit about your reflections. So maybe you can talk about the challenges of the exercise. So you could talk about the challenges. Now, if you're going to talk about the challenges, it's kind of what are they? Well, it could be working online. Maybe that has been difficult. It could be that because you've never done a literature search before, you found that difficult. It could be that because you hadn't written a problem formulation before, that you found that difficult. The point is that you can talk in a general way about your reflections. So if you think something is difficult, you would then say what you had learned from it. So, you know, in that sense, that something has been difficult doesn't matter. All you have to do is kind of explain what you've learned, and that is good. Okay, so I would hate for you to think that you had to show what brilliant students you are, because that is a bad idea. It's a bad idea because if this is the first time you've ever done this and you have had challenges and maybe the piece of work is not great, maybe it's just okay. If it's just okay, then it's very difficult to come over to present an image of being a brilliant student. So it's much better and highly recommended to talk about what you have learned. So you can say, you know, we found doing the literature search very difficult because normally we just do a quick and dirty search. That would be a Google search. And when we had to do this other thing called a Boolean search, we weren't sure how to do it. But now we do know. Now, if you say something like that, that might give me or the other examiner the opportunity to ask you a question. And the question might be, can you tell me more about how to do a Boolean search? And you would say, yes, I can. You need 2 keywords, and then you can connect the 2 keywords by using Boolean operators. And these words, the operators are the words and, or, and not. And I then think to myself, and so does the other examiner, oh good, they've learnt how to do a Boolean search. So, if you like, admitting that you couldn't do something to start with, or that you found something difficult, is a good thing, because then you can say, you can use that as a way of saying what you now know, that you have learned something, that the teacher has succeeded, and that you have succeeded in your piece of work. So that my first advice is probably to do a short presentation. I wouldn't, as a group, I would not talk for more than 4 or 5 minutes. So like 1 minute per person, for example. And I would choose maybe one thing that I thought was interesting and one thing that I thought was difficult. When you start the presentation, you will not need a PowerPoint. You might have one on your computer, but you don't need to share it unless you want to. And that means that when you say something like, we did a quick and dirty search, and then you say, oh, and then we did a Boolean search, and that was so much more efficient, it might give me the opportunity to ask a question, such as, did you do a snowball search? At which point, hopefully, somebody in your group will be able to remember what a snowball search is. And that somebody can then answer the question. So just because you are talking does not mean you have to answer the questions. It might mean somebody else in your group answers the question. That is good, because that is a sign of good group work. So what are we saying? We're saying 1 minute. Hang on a minute, I'm not typing. I'd like to type this so that you can. 1 min per person presentation about something that you thought was difficult or challenging. I'm not bothered what word you use there, frankly. Challenging, but the thing is, what did you learn? Okay, the response, let's say teacher response might be a question. Anyone can answer that question. because that question is for the group. So now I've just got to, I was typing there and I've made all sorts of typing errors. Just a second. There we are. So anyone can answer. And why is that a good thing? Because it shows good group process. It shows that you have been working together and that you work together, and in the exam you are working together. So that's my advice for getting the exam going. As we've said, the exam is 30 minutes long. In a practical sense, Mr. Sau is organizing it. So Mr. Sau is going to give you a schedule, and the exams will be in the afternoon, of course, because they more or less have to be. Otherwise, I can't be there. More or less have to be. So the exams will be in the afternoon, just as the teaching is now, today, for example. And there will be 2, 3, possibly even 4 groups, but I think probably 2 or 3 in one afternoon. There will be 2 examiners. And one will be me. And I'm not sure who the other will be, but it's probably Dr. Lone, or it might be Mr. Sau. I don't know. Mr. Sau knows when he knows. That is to say, he hasn't done the schedule yet, so please don't ask him, because if he hasn't done it, he can't give you an answer. He will send you and me a schedule. And as we've said before, the exams will be in, no, a minute, let me just check to be certain. The exams will be, clickety, clickety, click. The exams will be, they will be on Monday the 10th of January, 11th, no, 10, 12, 13, 10, 12, 13. So, but what we do know is that 10, 12, 13 January. So the exams will be on those days in your afternoon, but I can't tell you any more yet. Now, if you've just joined us, and I can see 1 or 2 people have just come in, please read what is in the chat, because I don't want to have to say it again. But please read what is in the chat so that you know what we know so far about the exam. The exam content is a bit like your construction exam. That is to say, whatever you hand in, whatever you give in to WiseFlow, is what I will ask questions about. So if you have written something which I think is interesting, I'll ask a question. If you've written something which I think is wrong, I might ask a question. But I will only be using your manuscript. Okay? So we can write that. We can write questions based on manuscript. And that means that when you're in your exam, it's a good idea to have your manuscript with you in some way. It might be in print, it might be on another screen, it really doesn't matter. But it's a good idea to have the manuscript there, because then you can refer to it. So if I say on page 5, in the second paragraph, you write blah, 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 blah. Then, of course, you're able to look at that paragraph and see what it is you wrote. And you think, okay, he's asking me a question about I don't know, the bibliography or something. And now I can see I've made a mistake. And then you can explain how the mistake happened. You can explain how you would fix it. And I will be happy because I will know that you have learned how to fix it. So the whole point of this exam is not to appear to be perfect students. The point is that you appear to have learned a lot, that you have been good students because you have studied, and maybe you made some mistakes, but if you know how to fix them, then those mistakes are no longer mistakes. They are in fact good things because you know how to fix them. So that's the best advice I can give you about the exam. The exam should not be threatening. It should be an opportunity for you to tell me what you know about the lessons we've had together, and an opportunity for you to tell me about what you have written. And when we think about it, if there are, let's say there are 5 minutes for some sort of presentation, right? If we say that, and then we say there are 5 minutes, maybe a bit longer, something like 5 to 8 minutes for some sort of feedback, we're already down at like 18 minutes of questions. But the questions generate answers. So the thing is, how many answers can you give? And the answer is not many, because by the time I've asked a question and you have answered it, and then maybe there's another question and you have answered it, the clock is ticking all the time, so there aren't going to be that many questions. Because there's only like 20 minutes and I have to ask each member of the group at least one or perhaps 2 questions. You can see that if that is the case, there are 4 people, 20 minutes, I ask 2 questions, that takes me, shall we say, a minute. They have only got 2 minutes per question to answer. So in that sense, there aren't many questions and there aren't many answers. Send me a smiley, please, if you understand exactly how the exam works. Okay, a lot of smileys coming in. Maybe I've said enough about exams. So that's good. I'm assuming that everybody now understands what the exam is about. Now, I'm not going to name names, but some people have sent me some drafts.
Teacher, can I ask something about the exam?
Yes, please do.
I see that on VoiceFlow,
Yeah.
uh, we are in groups, and it said something like each person have to hand an individual paper. So
But there
only
is,
one, only one of us will be handing it in because it's a group work, or
yes. So when you you see, I don't use WiseFlow as a student, but I do know that when you are a group, you should be able to hand in as a group. So one person actually sends the work to WiseFlow, but WiseFlow will register it as being from all group members. Okay. If you don't know how to do that, and I don't know how to do that because I'm not a student, if you don't know how to do that, then maybe each person can hand in the same work as the rest of the group. Okay, so I understand that, I'll just write it up, hand in as a group. So one piece of work, oh dear. Sorry, my fingers in my brain aren't working. One piece of work equals 4 group members. So it should be possible, and I don't know how to do it, but it should be possible to hand in one piece of work which is handed in for the group members. And then WiseFlow will, at my end of WiseFlow, at the examiner's end, I will be able to see the same piece of work next to the 4 names in the group. And I know that this is group work, so this is not a problem. And that's how it works. If you can't do that, then maybe each person could hand in the piece of group work. So, the group work is handed in 4 times by 4 different people. The one thing you must do, and this is in big letters, you must hand in. Because the problem is, if you don't hand in, you've got to figure that out. You must hand in. Because if you don't hand in, it will count as an exam attempt. And you have 3 exam attempts, that's okay. So if, I'll just write this, if no hand in, registered with your name, that is the same as no hand in, and counts as that's kind of the bad news. So let's imagine that I'm in a group and I say, okay guys, I think I know how to hand in, and I hand in my piece of work, and I think that I've handed it in for the whole group, but actually I've made some sort of mistake. And one person in the group does not have the hand in registered. This means, of course, that they do not go to the exam. This exam that we're talking about, on the 10th or the 11th or the whatever it was, 12th of January there. They wouldn't be able to go to the January exam. It's not a problem. It's just a nuisance. It's a pain in the ass for them. But it's not a problem because they can use that piece of work, but they hand it in as a single person for a so-called exam reattempt, a second try at the exam. Now that's how it happens formally using WiseFlow, but the face-to-face, the actual oral exam, is then a little bit more difficult for that person because they're on their own. And that means that every question I ask, they have to answer. Okay, so it's very important that you figure the WiseFlow thing out. And if you can't, and we do have, I think, 1 lesson next week, if you can't figure it out, then and I hope you're not going to hand in just yet. But if you go to Wiseflow, you can't figure out how to hand it in as a group. Then you email me that you don't know how to do it, and I will go and check with the secretaries, because they know how you're supposed to do it, and then I'll present how to do it the day before. I think we have one lesson the day before you're supposed to hand in. So we could do it that way, okay? But don't panic about handing it in. Don't panic about second exams. Just take a look at Wiseflow and see if you can figure out how to hand in. If you can't figure out how to hand in as a group, you send me an email, you let me know, and I will find a way of helping you the next time we're online together. Is that okay? Send me a smiley if you understand.
That's great.
Okay.
And maybe one more thing.
Yes.
What is the format that we will be handing out paper in? Is it going to be Word or PDF or?
I think it's best as a PDF.
Okay.
I think that Wiseflow might turn it into a PDF actually if you don't, but it's best as a PDF, because that way, of course, nothing gets changed when Wiseflow kind of converts it into a virtual document. I don't know what format it's in, but Wiseflow. But when that means nothing can move, so to speak, in your document, so it looks the way you want it to look. So I think I'm just going to write PDF smiley. I don't think it's a requirement, but I think it's a good thing.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us. So, 1 minute per presentation, or was it? Yeah, trans written 1 minute per presentation. That's 1 minute per person. Okay, so I'll just so it's very short, maybe 1 minute, maybe 2, but not long, because there is no requirement. The examination does not say you must do a presentation. The presentation is, I think, a good way for you to start your exam, because you have prepared what you're going to say. And that means that if you're a little bit unsure about your English, or you're nervous about the exam, then you start the exam in a good and confident way. So it's like 1 minute, maybe 2, but 1 minute per person per presentation. So I'll just put that in 1 min per person, and I'm putting recommended, because it is not a requirement. It's not something you must do. I just think it's a really good idea for you to do it. So that's where we are with the exam. Is there anybody who has any other questions about the exam while we're talking about it?
I see that in the title of Wiseflow, it said that it's the first attempt. Will that be like the second attempt? Or?
No, this is the first attempt. When you hand in, whenever that is, but when you hand in the work that you have done, and I would say do not do that yet, I would wait. But when you hand it in, that is your first attempt. This is the first time you're doing this exam. And then I don't think anyone's going to fail, to be honest. But if there's a failure, then when you went to Wiseflow, it would say second attempt. If you failed that, then you would go to third attempt. If you failed that, there is a procedure for dispensation. But you don't need to worry about second attempt, unless, of course, the hand-in cannot be done as a group. and somebody gets missed out. And that's where they get a second chance to hand in and to have the exam. Do you understand?
Yeah, I think I understand.
Yeah, so there's nothing to worry about. I don't want you to worry about
Yeah.
it. Yeah. You could worry about other exams, but you don't need to worry about this exam. Okay, so does anybody else have anything they want to write in the chat or speak to me about? I'll just give you a moment. You can see Khan is typing, but I don't know if he's typing to me. I don't think he is, actually. Maybe not. Okay, it doesn't matter. Okay. Yes, he is. Right, okay. The answer to Khan's question is either. So you might be graded as a group, and you probably will be, but we do have the choice as examiners to distinguish between one person and another person. And if one person has done all the work and somebody else hasn't done much work, then yeah, you might get individual grades. So the starting point is group. I'll write that in if you like. As an examiner, my starting point is a sort of group grade, but if there is a very strong or very weak student, then it would be an individual grade. So let's imagine that you do your presentation and you answer the questions, and one group member answers with brilliant answers. They're really, really good answers. Maybe that person gets a 10,